Hello and welcome back to the next episode of Transracial Adoption, Positive or Negative. My name is Xinru and I'm here with my co-host, my mother.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth, and today we're going to be talking about primary school days. But first of all, we want to be very honest with you about the ups and downs of relationships. And we should have been doing this episode about 3 or 4 days ago, was it? And we had a quarrel and ended up not doing it. And we want to be open about the fact that we do sometimes disagree on all sorts of things, and that we don't want to present an over rosy picture of everything. So we're just going to talk about our relationship.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's important for us to be honest, because in the previous episodes, people may have gotten an impression that we're very close and that we always get along and that everything's always happy and fun and everything, but that is definitely not the case. The reality is that we do actually argue quite a lot about really stupid things, but we do both get on each other's nerves, and there is a lot of friction sometimes because I think our personalities don't always get along.
I think it's worth asking ourselves, I mean, we've discussed this before, but is that because we're not genetically linked? Is it because of adoption? Or is it just two different personalities? What do you think?
I think generally everyone argues with their parents. There's very few people that I know who really get along with their parents all the time. So I think overall it's probably just a normal thing to not get along with your parents. But then I think on top of that, to us specifically, I think it's definitely a personality thing, which I don't think that's necessarily correlates to whether you're genetically related to someone either. It's just your personality is your personality. I think our personalities probably clash there a bit because they're quite different. But then on the one hand, I would say that we are also closer than lots of my other friends with their parents as well. Even despite the arguments and things we have, I do feel as though we're closer than other people and their relationship with their parents.
It's fine on the good days, but we have bad days. Definitely. Don't we?
Yeah, the bad days are less now that I'm older, but they're still there.
It was pretty much all bad days from about when you were 13 for a couple of years, wasn't it?
But then that's the teenage years.
No.
Yeah, I started going to therapy when I was in my third year at university, so I was 22.
Can't remember.
Yeah, I was 22. I started going, and a lot of the things we spoke about were adoption-related issues, and we spoke a bit about like our relationship and how we tend to argue and get along. Because there was a point actually when I was a teenager where we thought about going to therapy because
we went to one session, didn't we? At Relate, we went to one session, and she ended up saying...
She said, there's nothing wrong.
Yes, which wasn't true, but it was nice that she thought that.
Yeah, she said it's not bad enough for us to need therapy.
Because you can talk to each other. And because in the waiting room we were talking to each other, and there was another couple. Do you remember there was a man and a woman?
No, I don't.
A married couple there. And they weren't talking I mean, I don't mean they were obviously sulking or anything like that, but afterwards I realised we were sitting there chatting away and this other couple was sitting there silently, and I think that's what she meant, that we hadn't reached the silent stage where we couldn't talk.
But I think going back to when I started going to therapy, she brought up lots of different interesting viewpoints and perspectives, and related to a question of whether we argue because we're not biologically related or whether, any of that. I think, there's to a certain extent, no, that's got nothing to do with it. I think it's normal to argue regardless of whether you're related biologically or not. Again, with the personality thing, that's totally irrelevant, whether you're related or not. But I think maybe a lot of the anger that I had as a teenager, and even maybe now that I was less conscious or aware of before, is that there's a lot of anger or even resentment towards you, and it's probably to do with adoption in some small way. I think it does play a part, even if the child is not, or the adoptee is not aware of it. Because I think, speaking from my own experience, there is a lot of anger that you have being adopted. Sometimes you're not even, as I say, you're not even fully aware of it or conscious of it, but it is there. And sometimes there's that anger needs to be let out in some way, and so unfortunately most of the time it would be the adopted mother who would have that taken out on them. Even if I had a father, it's generally the mother.
It is the mother,
because because you're angry at your biological mother. that's one potential.
That's one theory.
Reason. Well, one theory. And that's something that the therapist that I went to in Oxford brought up. I think that part, that there is an element to the adoption in that. Or at least, as I said, other children and teenagers will argue with their parents. That's completely normal, but there's probably another layer to it.
And it's hard for a single parent, because I remember, again, going to one of my famous lectures, and they said, to husbands, you need to support your wives because she's probably going to bear the brunt of it. And I remember sitting there thinking, I haven't got a husband. So it's not going to be easy for me. So what do you think about our relationship? You think it has improved? Well, it obviously has improved since then, but you think it's improving all the time or not?
Yeah, I think it's really hard for any child with their parent to not fall into old habits, because when you go home or when you're in that, with your back in that kind of relationship, it's so easy to revert back to how you were, and erase all of the years you might have been independent, living your own life.
Yeah.
So I think it is easy to fall back into those. But I think I think our relationship has definitely improved, and I think it still continues to improve. We have lapses, but I think that's, again, totally normal. And then I also think I did a silent meditation retreat. Yeah, I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat earlier this year in Thailand in February, and I think that really, really changed things.
Yeah, I think so. I think it was a noticeable difference.
Yeah, it was life-changing, and I've done a whole video about it on my channel for anyone who is interested in listening to that. But yeah, I came away from that and I had a lot of learnings, and yeah, one of them was that I just wanted to spend a lot more time with mum.
And you might go on another at some stage.
Yeah, I'm planning on doing a 26-day silent meditation retreat early next year. So.
When she went on the first one, I was saying, and so were, I imagine, lots of other people, she'll last 3 days and she'll be out, because there was no books even. Yeah, no, you weren't allowed to. There was no electronics, no contact with the outside world, no talking, no reading, no writing, no listening to music. No exercise? No exercise, nothing. Yeah, just meditating. Astonishing. I just didn't think she'd make it for 10 days. I was waiting for the phone call. Really? Yeah, except that both Ching and I both went down with COVID as soon as you left, so I didn't have much time to think about it, really, although I wasn't feeling particularly ill, but, it was weird the way it all coincided. Yeah. But no, then you came out and you said you loved it and you want to go back. Were you really surprised? Yeah, very surprised. Yeah, very surprised. I don't think I could do it. I think everyone should do it. And I was going to say, anyone who's watching the first episode of this may have seen signs that we hadn't been getting on. Do you remember? I reckon in that first video I looked like a hostage. No, I think it's more you were just very nervous about filming. It's a hostage video, that's what I think. No, you just had anxiety about filming. Yeah. So, have we got anything else to say on that, or shall we go to school days? Well, I think, there's so much to say on that, but we can always, do a whole episode on our relationship in the future. Yeah. Yeah. So we talked all about nursery and obviously Ching's integration into the household. And then you went to school at the age of 4.5-ish. So I didn't know in advance whether I should contact the school. Also, I've been in contact with the school, but to tell them that you were adopted, because the normal procedure seems to be in all adoptive families that the parent goes in and has this long chat with one or more teachers, explaining that the child's adopted, asking them to be very careful what they say, for instance, if they do family trees and all that sort of stuff, and be careful that they present everything in the right way and be sensitive about it. And I always assumed I would do that, but by the time you went to school, I decided not to. And I was very unusual, I think, in that. Why? You were extremely sort of articulate and very open about being adopted. Really? You talked about it a lot, yeah. Remind me, tell me. You'd go, one of your little theories, which was quite sweet really, was I've had 5 parents, You say to other children, you've only got 2 parents. I've had 5. So that would be 2 birth parents, 2 foster parents, and 1 parent that you were then living with. It's just a lovely little
I remember
thing,
saying
really.
that. I remember saying that to people.
Yeah. So, and things like that, you were very open about it. I think young children are. I think the desire to be a bit more private about it is odd. I certainly was never going to tell you not to, telling you to keep it quiet or anything like that. I think that would be a terrible thing to say, wouldn't it? Even if I felt it was perhaps not very sensible to talk to openly. But no, it was great that you were really open. And I knew you would be. And also you were very observant. Very, very observant. If I had gone off to the school and told them stuff about you, which then emerged in any way, you would have known that I'd done that. Now, okay, I could have got around that by telling you I was going to do it. But again, that implies there's something different and problematic about adoption. I just thought about it in great detail, and I thought, she's going to pick up there's something going on if I do anything. And I felt you would be fine to be talking about it yourself. I knew you'd be open, therefore the teachers would know, therefore hopefully they would be tactful if anything cropped up about family trees and everything. And I think it worked out fine, didn't it?
No, I don't really remember.
Don't remember anything about it. No, certainly there was never any issue, never any trauma, never any bullying about that anyway. Well, no bullying at all. But I always felt with you, you were so observant that I must be honest and open. I couldn't go... I know, of course, these parents are not going behind the back of their children. I'm not saying that at all, but they're trying to do the right thing and be tactful. But I knew you would pick it up. And that therefore, I never wanted there to be any implication that there was anything secret about it all. You know, because if you keep something secret, people think there's something wrong or embarrassing about it. And there isn't, and so I didn't want that to be the case, really. So I didn't tell anyone. I knew you went in, and I know for a fact that within a few days you told everybody.
Really?
About your back. Yeah, you were very keen on talking about it. Yeah.
How did you know that I'd told everyone?
You probably told me, and I don't know. Yeah, probably told me, I think. So how did you... Can you remember going to school? How did you find it? Remember you transferred from nursery then to school, so it was probably a similar...
I don't really remember school that much, other than the tables and the seats and the little activities we did. I do remember in year 3 though. I think it was Father's Day.
Oh yeah.
I remember. Yeah, it was Father's Day, and I was in year 3, and every time it was Father's Day, I would do a card because everyone would make cards for their fathers. I would always make it for
Jack,
for my granddad instead. But I don't know why I remember that. Yeah, and I do remember I think it was year 3 as well, we were doing family trees, and how my whole one side was just completely blank. Everyone else had 2 sides and I just had one.
Weren't there any other single parent
families?
I don't
think so. No, I don't think so.
Because I always thought there wouldn't be single parent families because we were mainly in an immigrant area and it tends to be less common. But that's not true, actually. A lot of the Asians were single parents, weren't they?
Were they?
Well, I suppose they still saw the father, so that's why the father would be on the family tree. But yeah, there were some. I remember saying that the first time I went in to the teacher, saying, have you got any other single parent families? And she sort of said, yes, of course. It's quite common. So there must have been some, but perhaps the father was around, but he just wasn't in the household.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was good. I was a bit worried about that. So you don't remember whether you were happy at school or...
I was happy at school. I think I really enjoyed school.
I think you did.
Yeah.
You're always bustling around. I remember when you created little worksheets for all your little friends to do, because that's what the teacher did. So you created some and took them in and they had to do in the playground. I just think, poor things, they've been doing worksheets all day and then they have to do them in the playground with you. I was half afraid they'd refuse, but they didn't. Do you remember any... what was it like having such a racial mix? Were you aware of that? All the different festivals, all the different cultures. Did you hear lots of other languages, for instance?
Yeah, I think so, because in my school everyone was different. Everyone was from all over the world, and even if they were born and raised in England, they were still from all these different types of families. And our school always celebrated every single festival there was. And yeah, most of my friends, all my friends in primary school, I don't think I really had any white friend in primary school.
No, there weren't any, were there?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Not really.
No.
It's only my friends' children that you knew who were white kids.
Yeah, I think all my friends at school were non-white. Yeah.
So that was, I suppose that was good. Yeah. Because I think that's good, but there was one white family across the road who I won't name, but a woman with 2 children at your school, same age as you in Xinru. And when it came to secondary school, she told me she had chosen a secondary school away from where we were because she thought that her children ought to go to a school with more white children. And at the time, I tried to tell myself that I liked her, so I tried to tell myself, well, that's okay. You know, it's the same principle as someone who's got Asian children wanting some Asian children. in the school that those kids go to. It was a little bit of a warning bell for a white woman to say that. And years later, she sent me an email in support of Brexit. So I thought, perhaps it was racist. Yeah. But anyway, I think there's been a lot of white flight from where we lived. You know, it was unusual, wasn't it, to have a white family in our road. So yeah, it was most unusual. The teacher came to visit us before you started at school. The teacher and the assistant used to go around every single child in the class to visit everybody. I think because there were so many different families from different backgrounds, and they wanted to assess the children because some of them could do almost nothing, not even speak a word of English or anything like that. You know, there was so much language support at your school, wasn't there, for the kids that didn't speak the language. I always remember she came in and she definitely took a dislike to me for a variety of reasons. One being that you'd made a decision after I'd filled in the forms for the school with your Chinese name. You'd then made a decision that you wanted to be called by your English name at school. I think there'd been some new people at the nursery who always struggled, didn't they, with your Chinese name, either spelling it or pronouncing it wrong.
Adults?
Yeah.
Oh.
The carers and nursery nurses and teachers and things. And you were moaning about it and getting really annoyed about it. And I said, well, at school, if you wanted to, you could use an English name, and you jumped at it. So I had contacted the school weeks and weeks before you started there saying, oh, no, this is the name she wants to be called. But I didn't realise it had caused difficulty. I had to create another thing for the name peg. I mean, you wouldn't have thought that was too awful, but I think she was quite ratty about that, about having changed your name, as far as the school was concerned. And then I didn't answer the door when she knocked. I let you two answer the door, which I thought was really nice. But I think she was just a bit ratty with me. And then the assistant said to me, is her father Chinese? And before I could answer, the teacher stepped in. I think she realised that was a tactless question, so she stepped in with something else, and I wasn't required to answer it. Because I decided to leave you to say all of that, you see. I didn't want a direct question about it. So that was interesting, that they asked me that.
So in that visit, they didn't ask whether I was adopted, or it wouldn't become apparent then?
I think it was apparent, but no, nothing was said.
Oh, okay.
Because I didn't say, and the teacher stopped the assistant in her tracks from asking me about it. Yeah. So you may not remember this, how did you find it in a class where there was such a range of abilities? I mean, some of the kids really were underdeveloped in terms of both language and what they could do.
I genuinely don't remember. I think the only one thing that I remember to do with that is that I just remember once I got sent to the year above's class to go and get some books to read.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
I think they managed pretty well, really. I know the teacher said, in reception we find it really difficult because you've got some children like your daughter who can read, write and add up and do everything she needs to do to a very good standard, and then we have some kids who can do nothing, and we have to somehow accommodate all of them. It must have been very, very hard. But I think certainly the children, in terms of their English, caught up very quickly. The ones that weren't speaking English picked it up, that first year, I'm sure. I don't think that was too much of a problem. Okay, do you remember singing Two Little Dicky Birds in Punjabi?
Yeah, I do actually.
So you do remember
By
that?
the kitchen door.
Can you sing it now?
No.
Alagai Peter, Alagai Paul, I remember that. I'm sure that's what it was.
Yeah, but I can't remember.
Apologies to anyone who speaks Punjabi if that's wrong. Used to come home and sing it all the time.
Really?
Yeah, so Chingy knew it by the time she went there. They must have been very impressed. But I remember it's not at school, at work once, one of my colleagues, again, not a nasty person as far as one could tell, being very rude, this is before I adopted you actually, about schools that make the children speak Asian languages. And I think this stupid rumour, probably in the Daily Mail, had arisen because of things like you singing this one little nursery rhyme in Punjabi. Forcing children to speak Punjabi. It's rubbish.
Very racist.
Rubbish. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Horrible. I never had the slightest objection. I thought it was nice. I used to sing, there was a Sikh song for Guru Nanak's birthday that you both
I
learned
remember
to
that
sing.
one,
And, all sorts. I thought it was lovely. God, I mean, some people, who cares? Why does it matter? Anyway, so there was that. And then there was learning music that you did at school. Do you remember starting the
Recorder? Yeah,
recorder?
I do.
Yeah. Now, I was very keen for you to do music because I'd been to this lecture that said that learning to play music, not singing, not listening, learning to play a musical instrument is the best thing, especially for a child that's had a neglected early life from birth on, for helping the brain to reform pathways in the brain. I mean, I know it sounds so far-fetched, but there's clear research about that, and lots of musicians I know have confirmed that this is true. It's research from very reputable backgrounds that the best thing you can do for a child with a neglected background is to get them to play a musical instrument. So I knew that. So as soon as I got this little piece of paper about learning the recorder, I thought, well, that'll be a start. So we started it, and it just snowballed into a very expensive hobby because in no time you were going on to learn the flute, so I had to buy a flute, and then you started taking exams, and then you started needing private lessons one-to-one, and so it went on. So you were playing the flute all the way through, and then you taught Xing to play. As soon as you learned to play the recorder, you taught Xing to play the recorder. So by the time she started, this was at junior, not at infants, she went in there able to play the recorder, so she went straight onto the flute. But I think it was a good thing to do from that angle, so I never begrudged the money on music lessons, even though it was clear that neither of you was going to be a professional musician, but you did do quite well. You ended up in...
Yeah, I got my grade 8.
Youth orchestra and everything. Yeah. So I think it was a good thing to do, but I wouldn't have gone to all that trouble if it hadn't been for this research that said it was really good. I thought, well, it can't do any harm and it might do good. Because although you were both very healthy when I got you, I mean, there is a degree of emotional trauma in both your lives, being chopped around between carers, isn't there? So I felt, well, it would be worth doing if there's a strong evidence that it helps. Of course, we'll never know, will we?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy playing, or did I have to force you?
No, I did like playing, but I think to a certain point, it got to a point where, when you're a teenager, you just want to go out and play with your friends, and Mum would force us to practice for like half an hour every day, and I think I really...
Not every day.
Yeah, almost every day, like 5 times a week or something. Like, Mum would just force us to sit and practice, or threaten us with things if we didn't do it.
Like what?
Like, oh, you can't go out, or you can't do this, you have to practice, I'm paying all this money for these lessons. And I liked the orchestra at school, in junior school, and then in primary, there's a primary school orchestra and then a junior school orchestra, I think, and then
at secondary school. Yeah.
There's at secondary school, and then we went to the youth orchestra, but that was quite difficult because I always felt as though I wasn't good enough to be in that orchestra. I felt really nervous having to do solos and do pieces by myself and things. But I didn't enjoy playing the flute. I enjoyed it. I liked doing the grades and everything, and it was nice to have that as a extracurricular activity at school.
The Chinese tiger mother used to make her 2 daughters do it 3 hours a day.
3 hours?
Tiger mother, yeah. Chinese tiger mother. This is what a lot of Chinese parents are like.
Yeah.
So you didn't have that?
No.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it was good. The other thing you did was, extracurricular activities. So we've sort of talked about some of them in theory, haven't we? But by the time you were in primary school, I transferred you from the sort of ad hoc lessons that we were doing with the Chinese Centre, the Cantonese Chinese Centre. We went to the Mandarin School in Harrow. So there was a big Chinese Saturday school in Harrow, probably a couple of hundred people, just at a guess, children.
Yeah, there's a lot of children.
Lots of children, lots of classes. So there was a class for every year, and you moved up in a sequence then were taught GCSE, Mandarin, and so I felt that was important. And it meant you were, every Saturday morning, you spent it with all these British Chinese children, some of whom were being coerced into going, others who wanted to be there. And some who were not Chinese, but not many. So do you remember starting there, and did you enjoy it?
I don't quite remember starting there.
You were 7, I think,
yeah,
and Xing was 5.
I don't remember starting. I do remember the Saturday school. It was good and bad, It was... I liked making the friends that I made. I remember my GCSE class, there was a little group of us, we were all friends and we'd all help each other out with homework and things, but I really struggled in the classes. It was really difficult because when you got to a certain class level or age, I think it must have been maybe 13 or 14, they just started speaking Chinese the entire class. There was no English spoken, it was all to prepare you for the GCSE. No, I found it really difficult. I think
I know you
just
did, yeah.
doing the homework, even when I was 7 and 8 and stuff, you have to go home, do the homework, and it was just really difficult to even understand what was going on and understand anything in the classes.
At 7 and 8, I don't think it was too bad because I was still a teaching assistant at that point. I volunteered to be a sort of teaching assistant, sitting in on the class because I wanted to know what they were doing. And I was sometimes able to help because sometimes there were Chinese teachers there who were fresh from China and not used to Bolshi children, British Bolshi children. I mean, there was one teacher who was in tears. And I had to sort of explain, I'm afraid it's like this in English schools. They're just, they don't pay attention and they're very impolite.
Chinese children like that too. When I taught English in China.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, they obviously weren't at the schools. This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, so, so I was there. And it's fairly simple, I thought, right up until about 11, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah. Until, yeah.
But
Probably even
after
once you
that-
get to, the secondary school age, it started getting a lot more difficult. And
I
actually wanted to quit when
Yeah.
I was,
There was this watershed, wasn't there, at the end of your primary years where you wanted to give up everything, and that's not an unusual thing. You wanted to give up music and you wanted to give up Mandarin, and you didn't want to do Latin, which was an option at your secondary school.
That's
And
why I was in year 8 though.
Yeah, I had to bribe you on all fronts. I financially bribed her
Yeah, she bribed me.
to do all of these, and she agreed to do them, and then you were glad you'd done all of them, weren't you?
Yeah, no, now I'm glad. Well, I mean, Latin, I did classics for my degree at university, and then music, I'm really glad I continued with that, and then Chinese, obviously, it's very important, and my sister, who actually quit Chinese school, regrets it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
She did have a special reason for it. I mean, apart from the fact that she was getting fed up with it because it was getting too intense and she didn't like languages really, but it also meant she couldn't go on Saturday mornings to her ballet classes. So it was becoming a bit of a conflict anyway. So it was just a decision that, okay, she can give up if she really wants to. I was fairly firm, wasn't I, about not letting you give these things up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I'd have been a relaxed parent, you'd have given them all up, wouldn't you? You wouldn't have done any of them.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful. I'm grateful
Yeah.
to have been almost forced into doing them.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I felt you were miserable, I wouldn't have made you do it. I felt Xinru was becoming miserable about the Saturday stuff because it was getting to the point where all the less keen pupils had all dropped out, as they did in your class as well, and you just got the ones who were high flyers and who had parents speaking Mandarin. So in your case, I had to get you a tutor for the last 18 months before your GCSE.
Yeah, I would say it wasn't just the students who really wanted the GCSE. No, their parents wanted them to go to the GCSE and they couldn't quit
Really?
the class.
They were all being coerced.
And then, yeah, and
There's
then,
these classes full of children all being forced to do it.
yeah, we're all being forced. Yeah, all the Asian students, all the Asian kids that I'm sure can relate if you're listening to this. Chinese Saturday school, even from
Yeah.
British-born Chinese. Yeah, we all joke about it. Oh, Chinese Saturday. Oh yeah, Chinese Saturday. Oh, yeah, you went to Chinese Saturday school. Yeah, I went to... we could all relate because we were all forced to go.
See, this is good because my objective when I got you was I thought, what demographic in this country do the children fit into? And I thought the British Chinese community. So if you say you could all relate to each other,
Yeah, we can.
That's good. That's ka-ching for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing, so there was in the morning there was Saturday school for Mandarin, and then in the afternoon, in a different location, we had the Chinese community that we'd always been to since you were a baby, and they had a lovely class for Chinese dancing, didn't they? And I think you joined virtually right from the start,
beginning, yeah.
when you were 4, although eventually they had an age limit of 5. So yeah, I remember you starting as a very young child, and they started competing, didn't they, at Chinese dancing competitions at the Victoria and Albert Museum, and then you ended up on
Blue Peter! But we lied about my age
yeah
to get onto Blue Peter.
Yeah.
You had to be 8 and I was almost 8.
Was it 8 or was it
Yeah.
7? Okay,
Something like that, I think, yeah. Yeah, entered on Blue Peter, I got my Blue Peter badge, I was on TV, and I was on CBBS.
Yes, amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, Boogie BBs.
Yeah, see, that was definitely worth doing Chinese dancing. And then eventually, of course, it got bigger and bigger, and then we ended up with 2 teams, didn't we? A small team, and Ching Ching ended up, when she was 5, being able to join that, which was the first dancing she ever did. Oh, apart from a little bit of Bhangra. Do you remember we did, at the after-school club, there was a Bhangra dancing class that we arranged. So we've got a little video of her at 3 doing that. But then, yeah, so she started doing Chinese dancing. And do you remember how we always had to say you were better at it than her? Do you remember that?
No.
Yeah, because she was really good, wasn't she? I mean, let's face it, she was a good dancer. Then she gradually became good at it, but all the time it was always, well, I'm better than her. And we would go, yes, you are.
Really?
She wasn't allowed to be better than you. And then eventually, of course, you gave up at about 11, didn't you?
I don't really remember.
Yeah, you decided you didn't particularly want to carry on with it. And I was okay with that. I wasn't into coercing you to do Chinese dancing. But at that point, then Ching Ching gradually sort of became the star of the little team, didn't she, really? She became really good.
That's because she was also doing a lot of dance outside of this as well.
Not initially.
Not initially, but then she picked it up at
She did
8
eventually,
or 7.
yeah. You were both doing gymnastics, and then she changed from gymnastics to ballet.
Mm. It was really fun though. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got us really strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it helps because in the Chinese dancing they had a lot of acrobatic elements and gymnastic elements, so we could do all of that. And sadly, I can't anymore, but Ching Ching can.
It's a good start for her, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yes. I wouldn't let her take ballet because she wasn't concentrating at Chinese dancing. So when she started to concentrate, which she did quite soon, I said, right, okay then, ballet if you like. But I wouldn't, I wasn't going to waste money on it. We were quite hard up, weren't we?
Yeah.
Did you like it that you were at it wasn't the sort of primary school that most of my friends or even my sister would have ever sent their children to. Not for racist reasons at all, but because it was below average in the league tables. You had loads of children in your class who were behind with English and even behind with development, people coming in all the time, joining all the time. Do you remember immigrant children would come all the time and have to go off for special language lessons and things? Most of my friends would have looked at it and said, oh no, for my young child, they've got to have the perfect environment. But I thought it was a lovely school. I thought it was friendly and well behaved and just a really nice environment. I never thought of it like that. But how did you feel? Would you have liked to have been in a really intense, high-flying little primary school where you?
You can't really ask me that though, because I'm A, biased because of my own experience, and B, I'm not going to be able to know with retrospect if I would have preferred that. I think I probably would have enjoyed that as well if I was in that environment or not. So
maybe
it's difficult to have an answer. There's not really a right or a wrong answer. I think looking back, in secondary school when I was doing my A-levels, I actually attended my original school and I went to another school for my 5th A-level. And that school, there were a lot more white people. It was less diverse, racially diverse. And I think going to that school, it was a stark contrast to my school where it was so multicultural.
Yeah, did you wish you'd been at the other school all along or not?
No, but that's when I was at an age where I was old enough to I guess to recognise the differences. I think if I was a young child and I was in that school, you probably don't really notice it that much, even if it does have an effect on you. But I probably wouldn't have noticed it that much. I wouldn't have realised. I probably would have just still enjoyed myself and whatever at the school. Yeah. But then when I went to the other school for my A-levels, I did notice that it is a lot different. I don't know if I would have actually enjoyed it as much because it was I did stand out more. Yeah.
It's not really to do with adoption, but I was very keen not to hothouse you. I thought you can turn children off learning by pushing them too hard. So I wanted a school that was a bit more relaxed, and it was, wasn't it, the primary school? And even at secondary school, I said, don't let them, load you up with too much work, just take it easy. But then when you get to GCSE years, you really need to work hard. And I think that's good. I've known children of my friends where they've just almost burned out, really. I think there's a big danger of that. Neither of you two was turned off reading because nobody pushed you to read. You were let to do it in your own time and choose your own books. If you'd been to this other school, they were literally sent home with a book every night to read and they had to write up a little summary of it. I mean, that's turning reading into a horrible chore, isn't it? I think it's awful to do that to kids. But of course it brings that school up the league tables because all these kids whose parents force them to read it every night and help them to write up a little summary every night, they do very well in the SATs, but those kids hate reading. Horrible, isn't it? I just think, I don't believe in all of that. So I had lots of multicultural books. Do you remember that? We had lots of books at home from all different cultures. I belonged to a multicultural book club.
Did you?
All the little children's books.
I didn't know you belonged to a multicultural book club. Is that even a thing?
Yeah, it was a leaflet that came round every 6 months and I would order the books from that. You didn't know?
No.
Oh, well, you probably were too young to notice. But we had books from every
I know we had books from everywhere, but I didn't know that there was a
country,
multicultural book club.
Yeah. I was told about it by a friend and it was brilliant, wasn't it? I have so many lovely books, all different cultures from all over the world. And as many Chinese as possible, of course. I always went for Chinese books, so we had quite a lot of those. And the school, I think, tried to do the same. I think the school books were quite mixed in their ethnic background, weren't they, obviously? So, as we've said many times, you were going to a largely immigrant school. Some people, again, just playing devil's advocate for a minute, say that children in those sort of schools miss out on British culture. Now, most of the teachers were white British, weren't they, in your school? There were a lot who weren't, but the majority probably were. And there was a lot of British culture that was touched on in the school. But do you think that you missed out on British culture? So, for example, the big difference between your education and mine was that we used to have a Christian assembly every morning. Your school didn't do that, obviously, because most of them, there were a few Christians, but most of them all different religions or none. So you didn't end up knowing, as I do, all the Bible stories and things, which are reflected in British culture from back to the 19th century and earlier, everywhere. So do you think you did miss out?
No.
Okay. Would you like to enlarge?
Because even if I had learnt those things as a child, they probably wouldn't have stuck with me really now, because I'm not religious.
No, neither am I, but I remember it all.
Because it was drilled into your head as children.
Yeah.
But I think even when I was going to school, there weren't many schools, unless they were specifically religious schools, that did that anyway.
No,
the time I was going to school.
Things had changed anyway, maybe.
Yeah.
But you were, in a way, all together, but without that sort of bedrock, if you like, of children from a sort of typically British household. So one of the things I noticed was sometimes people would use American expressions and things, because if anyone watched films, it would quite often be American films, and they didn't have that counteracted by children from British households speaking with a standard British accent.
But isn't that's less about, that's more about those children coming from middle class families. That's not necessarily being typically British. It's more that's more a class thing.
Well, pronunciation isn't, is it really? Well, it is in a different way, but...
Well, the way they speak, yeah, because even other... what about the poorer British families who do just watch these other TV shows and things? They might also they might always use American slang.
I think middle-class kids do too, these days.
I mean, these days as well, things have evolved. Nowadays, everyone's saying American things.
But I mean, in a way, it was different. You were not in a sort of white British environment, were you? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's different.
It is different, but I'd say a white British environment was probably typically more from middle-class family backgrounds then.
I mean, Ching noticed, didn't she, when she went to ballet, that she was surrounded by white British middle-class girls.
Yeah, because the ballet draws white middle-class families to it.
Yeah.
So that's more a class thing.
Yeah. It was all. I mean, in addition to in the immigrant area, it was in a way
which is obviously related to race, because the white people would typically were more likely to be middle class.
Yeah, but the white people, even at your school, were sort of from working class backgrounds, weren't they? There were some who were very poor, poor white with poor education, definitely. So that's primary school. Anything else that you remember from primary school that sticks out as being relevant to our discussion about transracial adoption? Were there different attitudes to adoption from what you might expect elsewhere?
I don't think so. I think everyone just knew I was adopted. As you said, I was quite open about it. I think one thing that I would add that we can talk about a lot more in another episode is that I just remember at primary school, especially junior school, I always felt the need to be in control. I really have a few memories of just really needing to be in control of situations, even my friends, all of that. And not in a healthy way, though.
I think you are quite controlling. You always have been. You always have been very controlling, actually. Yeah. It's interesting that you remember it.
Yeah, at primary school, definitely.
Did people resent it?
I don't think so, because we were too young to even really...
So you mean you were always the leader, you were always deciding what was to be done?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a result of your background, probably, that you have to be in control of everything. You used to try and control the family as well. Do you remember that? You would try to control me and control Ching, and I used to push back against it all the time. That's probably why we quarrelled. I used to think, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm a parent. You can't push everyone around, and the sooner you learn that, the better.
Yeah, but I think control is a big result of adoption. At least for me, being adopted. Yeah.
Yeah. So next time, we want to talk about sort of summing up whether we think transracial adoption and international adoption is a good or bad thing, or just at least look at the arguments one way or the other, don't we?
Yeah. So thank you for listening to this episode, and see you in the next one.
Bye.
Bye.